the first question is, I think we've had at least day one to really talk about the work and the impact, but I think we've also talked about the fears and the ideas of what this work looks like. And so I think the first, I guess, question that I have would be, what are the misconceptions that you believe that people are facing in your respective work, and just the fears that people may have when addressing AWS or having a background in technology or even geospatial work? What are the things that you've seen that have scared people, but what you want to encourage them to think differently about?
Okay, yeah, so I'll start. I mean, so coming off of my experience at Maxar, there's technical capability, then there's mission, and looking at the intersection, the two. And I think that, Sandra hit on some themes, the same capability that might provide a warfighter a recommendation, on a mission can also be applied to humanitarian assistance and disaster response. And so I think it's pretty important for people to align their personal values, with the mission or values of the company, organization, that they're a part of, because that's when they're going to bring their best self to their work every day. And so when I think about the early career professionals, I've had a chance to work with during my time at Maxar, and what I've seen through other experiences, it's putting them in an environment where they can apply their expertise in an area that they're passionate about, and whether that's in as a imagery analyst or doing GIS analysis, or helping customers be successful. I had a team member who had been a couple years out of college. She came in as an imagery support analyst. So this is basically someone that would Maxar flew satellites, fly satellites to image the Earth for mapping and other types of geospatial intelligence applications. And she went from someone that learned how to put in commands, how to actually command a satellite, to image a specific location, to within a few years of being out of college, she's literally on a WhatsApp, like helping mission partners in Ukraine, respond to the current crisis that they're in terms of how to apply satellite imagery to their specific mission. And so that ability to transition from really an apprentice that's learning, to being able to apply it into something that's very tangible, whether it was the disaster in Puerto Rico, that Sandra showed, or looking at providing visibility into human geography, so where are there inequities, based on people's backgrounds. I think that's really what allows people to get past any preconceived notions, about what may or may not be, kind of a good application of technology.
So I've worked at large companies, I've worked at startups, and so I'll reference my experience working at very large companies like AWS. I think the biggest misconception is that you become a very small, insignificant cog in a wheel. I think that couldn't be further from the truth, right? So right now, AWS probably employs well over 250,000 people, and we have roles for everyone. So I think as I work, one of the things I come across the most is people saying, "Oh my God, Eric, I had no idea Amazon did X." Okay, and so when I talk to young college students that think the only thing they're going to do for, quote, Amazon, right? So what you think of Amazon is delivering packages, or being on a production set trying to come up with the next version of, I don't know, Invincible, or you name the show, right? So that's two very small things, 2 potatoes in a very big sack of potatoes. So the idea that you can come into a large company and operate, and to Tony's point, operate and become the best version of yourself and actually contribute to something meaningful is something that you can do at both a large company and a small company. And I actually encourage that for some of my reports and some of the people that I work with and the people that I mentor.
Sorry, keep going back. And I'm happy you brought that up, because I think, for some of us who are in the Esri GIS space, there's so many different facets of how you can talk about the work, whether it's through marketing, sales, and then even learning the technology as a GIS professional. And so it allows people to see kind of the dynamics of what you can be doing at AWS and so forth, and we need to talk about that more. So I'm really happy you both explained that. I'm mixing up my questions. I just get passionate when I talk, so I need to just follow what I wrote and make sure I'm in order. But yeah, thank you. So that was like my third question, but I'm going to jump back to the first question. Can you briefly share how your kind of career path, like what started it? How did you get involved in your work? And was it a person? Was it, even a career fair? What was the driving force for you to get into this work?
Yeah, so for me, it was a mid-career pivot into geospatial and GIS. So I started my undergraduate, I studied engineering, so systems engineering at University of Pennsylvania, and then worked in consulting. So actually a fraternity brother of mine, I'm a Alpha Phi Alpha. He had encouraged me to look at strategy consulting because he thought it would be a good mix of engineering and business, and that was really the path I was very interested in. And so went to business school, got my MBA, and then worked in the commercial technology industry. So I came out of grad school in the late 90s, which is when the internet and e-commerce were really accelerating. Hence, the massive business that Eric, is a part of. And then that's really how I spent the first about 10, 12 years of my career. And I was looking to, I did a lot of work in applying natural language processing and speech recognition, so really analyzing unstructured text, to documents in the internet. But then I had an opportunity emerge to join the satellite imagery, company. And so it was kind of a similar model where we actually owned an asset that was collecting all this data, but we had to figure out how to make sense of it. How do you actually extract information, from it? And so that's really what, presented an opportunity for me to join the management team of GOI, and then from there, I just fell in love with the mission. And so seeing kind of the convergence of the two is what really drove my journey.
I've been tangentially involved in GIS my entire career. Starting off with the military. I'm a former SATCOM person. So I had done that for years. My first job out of the military was at a naval collection site. So I was collecting data, shipping it off to other places. And actually went to Hewlett-Packard, and I was running what's called a cross-domain team. So that was a team that moved data from one domain to another domain. And I discovered throughout that, this is on site doing consulting work, and I discovered I had a knack for actually explaining that concept, which is very technical, very bespoke, to people who had no idea what that meant, right? And it sort of got the attention of everyone I worked at HP, and said, Eric, you have a really good aptitude to explain to someone. You should do one of two things. Number one, you should sell it, or two, you should teach it. And I went, I didn't understand what that meant at the time. Yeah. And so you get whisked up into the pre-sales delivery portion of what you're doing, and I fell in love with it because it's a very high-paced environment. You have to be at your best. Remember how previously I alluded to being at your best, and it is just an amazing opportunity for you to be at your best, to be challenged, to be mentored, to be helped out, and so that's where I've been doing ever since.
I think two things that I got out of that I think are important for people to know is the pivot. I think a lot of people kind of assume, okay, I studied this or I started in this process, I can't change. And some people just hate their jobs, and it just might mean pivot. So I think it's really good to have people hear this, because I think a lot of people have the idea of I have to stick to what either I learned or what I started at. And sometimes that's just not the case. You might be able to pivot and find a new passion, or just be able to do something that you are going to be able to love. So I think that's important for people to hear. Thank you for sharing that. I think something important to talk about are the trends and skill sets that you've seen in the worlds that you've been working with. And so I'm just curious to know, what are some of the skill sets that you are seeing just come up in your workspaces, and what you feel are going to be critical for people to gain those kind of skills? And this can go across the board. I think sometimes we forget that it's not just about the tech skill that you learn, it's about people and relationships and understanding that. So what are things that you've seen in your work, and what you want to encourage people to think about to gain those kind of skills? And I'm going to start with you, Eric, and then.
So some of the trends that I've started to see, for a GIS professional, I think it's important to understand more than one discipline within GIS. Because if you're in a GIS style role, you're going to be exposed to different data types. And I've seen very, very talented people lose momentum in their careers because they could only do one thing, right? And it was really hard to switch and do the other thing, right? And so the people that I've seen that do exceptionally well have both an attitude and an aptitude to adjust to just different data types, okay? Because that tells the picture that everyone's talked about here today, whether it's some of the work that's done in the Ukraine or something in agriculture or even for national defense, that ability to take more than one data type, more than one data collection and turn it into something meaningful and then deliver it to people who make decisions, I think is very important. And I think I want to give credit to Sandra for communicating this as well. The soft skills are still very important, right? I have worked with very, very intelligent people who you don't want to work with because their attitudes and their are so acerbic, right? And so that ability to communicate concepts in a way that people understand, that draw people in and inspire them are also important as well. So I would encourage a lot of people to strike that balance between technical acumen and soft skills. When I interview people, I ask primarily soft skill questions because I'm just assuming that you have the technical aptitude to do the things that you need to do that's required for a role. But primarily, I'm looking for teammates. I'm looking for people that have gone through a little adversity. I'm looking for people that can fit in multiple roles and people that aren't afraid to contribute.
Yeah, I think that's great. What I would add is, being customer-centric is really important. And so to Eric's point, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable and taking on roles that go beyond just your technical expertise, into skills where you need to go sell a concept to someone. And so whether you're doing that as a sales engineer, as a consultant, as an executive at an agency where you're briefing, your work, not just doing the work, but briefing, the work, to leaders, that's how you get exposure. That's how you grow as a professional. And so if your goal is to grow, which I think, that was the theme of this this panel discussion, I think that's super important. The other thing I would say is be cognizant of kind of broader shifts that are occurring, in the market, and make sure you're evolving, to kind of follow that slipstream, so to speak. And so some examples that I've just seen in my time with the company. So I joined GOI in 2010. We became Digital Globe in 2013, and then Maxar was formed. And over that time, we went from software development. So how do I actually build web applications on top of geospatial data? That was kind of where things started. To then other applications, like how do I create more immersive virtual environments? So looking at applications of geo-specific augmented reality or virtual reality applications, and things like games like Pokemon Go, right? That kind of became this huge craze where it fused gaming and mapping in a way that we hadn't seen before, to now what's happening with AI, and so both the applications of AI that have been on display, whether it's to automate mapping tasks or to be able to characterize activity within an image, so help semi-automate that process, but also thinking about what's going to happen with generative AI. And so I think looking at how these fields converge is really, really important. There's always depth. You spend so much time building your credentials to build kind of depth of expertise, but being effective at breadth is important as well.
Thank you for that. And I think the idea of just being able to just be ready for the trends and accept the trends, it's interesting to see how many people get fearful of the change in technology and how there isn't the willingness to kind of learn these newer technologies. So I think that's really important. You made me think of a former colleague at Esri, and just a short story. He's a solution engineer, so what his role is to support people with their GIS technology and just making sure that they're comfortable and just fluent. And it's very funny to see how people describe him. I've had people say he's an old soul. He's very personable, and he's just a very caring individual knowledgeable about the technology. And, he was one of my favorite people at Esri. And I would ask him, like, what did you study in undergrad? He was like, oh, I did cultural anthropology. And I was like, what? Like, this gentleman who happened to be from Arizona, lived in Montana, and all this stuff. And he wasn't embarrassed, but he was like, yeah, I studied culture. And I was like, no. There's value to that, because his ability to immerse himself, understand, connect, and just identify with the human experience, it made sense. That was his undergrad degree. And so I think it was beautiful for him to connect that, because he didn't see the connection. He was like, I didn't think it would be, in what I'm doing now, but I'm like, no, it is. It's embodying how you even interact with people. So that's really valuable. My last question, and then we're going to open it up to the room. I'm going to spin the question a little bit, but the question really is, what words of encouragement would you have for people who are just kind of in their postgraduate studies trying to find careers in geospatial technology, but just to add another component, especially when we're looking at equity, racial injustice, social justice? How would you encourage that person who may be in a field that isn't a geospatial focus? It may not be focused on engineering or so forth, but they care about it, and they struggle to kind of merge the two in terms of conversations. We know that it's connected, but sometimes being able to use that as a voice can be very challenging. So how would you encourage people to do that?
So how would I encourage people that are historically disadvantaged to seek newer and greater, arguably better opportunities? I think so this is a question that I get pretty often when I'm working with underprivileged youth, is it reminds me of a story that an old agency admiral told me many years ago, where I had to go and ad hoc and give a presentation on something, and I was deathly afraid of that, because this person is in the news, and I'm up on the higher floors, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this person could probably push a button and incinerate me on site. And so I go through and I talk about the stuff, and he asked them, they asked them questions, and I answer the questions. And they said, okay, young man. He said, young man, this is a very long time ago. And he goes, okay, thank you, young man. By the way, what was your name? And I went, Eric Brown. And everyone starts to write my name. And I went, oh my God, they're writing my name down. I don't know what this means. And so I go out, and I'm thinking I did well, but then I realized I forgot my notebook in the room. And so I tell the aide, and I said, hey, I forgot my notebook. And she goes, I'll just go in and get it. Just open the door and go get it. And I'm, wait, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, just go get it. It's fine. And so I go into the room, and I open it up, and they're there. And so I pick it up. And so that person says, hey, Mr. Brown, that was a pretty stressful presentation you did, wasn't it? And I said, well, yes, sir, it was. And he said, I'm going to tell you the advice some old crusty admiral told me a long time ago, and that's to never be afraid of your shadow. You're in here for a reason. I'm in here for a reason. Our paths cross for a reason. Never forget that. You have value. And I must have floated back to my office, because I do not remember going back to my office. Right, and so that's what I tell to other students. Hey, never be afraid of you have value. You have ways to communicate and quantify and add to your value. Seek out ways to apply it, right? And this is where I think the power of mentorship and leadership and coaching comes into play. So that would be my advice: is to make peace with the man or the woman or the person in the mirror that has intrinsic value, absent external validation.
I love that. Yeah. Hard act to follow, but what I would just add is I think that there's so many resources out there that allow young professionals to both kind of hone their craft and also demonstrate their expertise. I think about with Esri, with what you offer with being able to create story maps, or Tableau has Tableou Public, right? And you can use publicly available data to create demonstrations of issues and that you're passionate about leveraging those types of resources. So I think I think there's ways that you can, kind of where I started the conversation is, take something you're very passionate about and make it real, where you then essentially build a portfolio, that allows you to show you're ready, for an opportunity. And so I think those are really important, just to be, very, actionable, kind of around, taking opportunities in front of you, to demonstrate your expertise. I think that's really important. I think the other is, something we're not very good at, I would say, just as a people, is activating your network. And I think that's something that I'm super passionate about. There are ways that you can get to someone, if you really think creatively about applying your network. One thing that I try and do, Sandra talked about paying it forward. I think we need to celebrate the people who've done amazing things in our industry, and then use that as a platform to show what's possible. But then we need to cultivate a community, around the kind of the broader for people who aspire, to get there. And so whether it's Tanya Wilkerson or Stacy Dixon, like Sandra talked about, I'm involved with INSA, the Intelligence National Security Alliance, and one of the real pioneers in the broader intelligence community is Lieutenant General Vince Stewart, who was first black director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the deputy at Cybercom when that was stood up. He was a first generation, like an immigrant, from Jamaica, and when he reached the pinnacle, of our industry, unfortunately passed, way too soon, and we're now, INSA and NSF, we're in the process of establishing a scholarship to honor his legacy, where we're going to, provide, scholarships to encourage black and brown early career professionals to pursue a career in the intelligence community. And so that, and the goal with that is to not just provide scholarships, but to create intelligence career pathways, where we can provide, the level of, mentorship, access to internship opportunities, essentially championing, the next generation, so that we leave this community better than we found it. And so I think, those types of, I'd say that for the early career professional, to kind of wrap up, there's, creating the opportunities to demonstrate, your expertise and credentials, but then also, being kind of proactive in activating a broader network, because there's a lot of people who want to help, foster the next generation.
So you said something. You said we have to celebrate the people in our community. That's why I read your bio. I'm just saying. That's why I had to read that whole bio and celebrate the work that you did. So I didn't want you to get mad at me. I could have cropped it, but I did. I read the whole bio, so we celebrate you. Thank you so much. Can we open it up for any questions? And I can come up. We have about, we're doing really well on time, so we have at least opportunities for 3 or 4 questions. Don't be shy. Yes. Thank you.
You guys are amazing, so thank you for that presentation. I learned a lot. We don't all know each other, we just happen to know each other. Can you talk about a time, in the past where folks have kind of overlooked you because of, the package that you're in, and what did you do when that happened? I'm just going to make an assumption it happened because it happens. Okay, thanks.
Oh, I have the microphone, so I'll start. It is painfully obvious I'm a very tall, muscular, bald, black man. And I am very extroverted, very extroverted and gregarious. There are times, and I'm in sales, and so there are times where you have intense negotiations around very, very large numbers. So 2 things happened. So this was maybe about a decade ago, and I was in a procurement cycle with a customer of mine, and things had gotten pretty heated to the point where, you know, we're not quite yelling at each other, but we're definitely raising our voices, okay? And so there's some knife hands. So if you don't know, the knife hand is where you're pointing. So, right? And so there's the knife hand, and right. And so eventually we, you know, come to an agreement, and everything is fine. Right there, you know, that person is a good person. We're friends to this day. And so about 6 months after that happened, so I'm sitting back and I'm talking to this person, and he goes, Eric, I have to level with you. When we were having that conversation, this was springtime, so I'm, you know, just wearing a polo, and he said, I'm looking at you doing the knife hand thing, and I'm thinking, man, this man's arms are so big, he could crush my head like a grape, and just walk out and not worry about anything. And then I said, I would never do that. Like I said, it is literally not in my personality to strike out like that in anger. And the person goes, Eric, I hear you say that, but then I see the veins in your arms and it makes me think a little differently, right? And so I have to be really careful. So, you know, so that put a little nugget in my head about making sure that I present myself well, because some people will see me and think I'm, you know, a bouncer, or I just get by on personality, or I'm an affirmative action hire, or, you know, whatever, and I really have to come in. This is why I love my role, and I love being in sales, is because the results matter, right? And you cannot argue with the results that show up, and they are completely completely objective.
Yeah, I would say that. So you referenced where I ended up at Maxar, you know, running $1 billion P&L. You know, where I started was at GOI. I had wanted to pivot, you know, out of more functional expertise. So I kind of grew up in marketing and product management, business development, you know, into general management. It was one of my early goals when I joined the company back in 2010. And the CEO at the time he said, well, you know, if you really want to go down that path, you know, in addition to this day job, you know, I got a nights and weekends job, you know, which is to, you know, help grow this $25 million P&L. And so that was really the first time I got that opportunity, which is great. You know, I appreciate his sponsorship to support that pivot. You know, when we went through the acquisition, when Geo got acquired by Digital Globe, yeah, I was the kind of the sole person on the management team that stayed on, you know, from GOI into that. And so anytime you go through an acquisition, you know, that's a huge culture shift for the team. And, you know, being the lone new guy, you know, coming in and sitting around the table, and being kind of the lone guy that looked like me, you know, around the table. Part of it was building a dynamic, you know, with the CEO. And there was a period where, you know, he kind of questioned whether the business I was leading, you know, kind of warranted, you know, being its own thing. Is it more of a feature versus a true, you know, product? Should it be its own, you know, separate P&L? And we had very frank discussions. I remember driving my kid to practice, you know, one day and having a call, you know, where, you know, I had to basically, ask him whether he wanted to be in the business or not. And should I go try and find a buyer, you know, for, you know, the business, because I believed in it and I thought it was aligned with what the strategy of the company was. If we were only going to focus on collecting data and not focused on generating insights, you know, then we were going to be commoditized, you know, over time. And ultimately, long story short, you know, it led to me briefing the board, you know, on my vision, you know, for the broader business. And within, you know, 5 years, you know, that $25 billion business became, you know, a $150 million business going on a path to $300 million, you know, dollars. And then that, you know, demonstrating that put me in a position to then run, you know, this broader portfolio. And so I think having conviction, you know, what you believe, you know, kind of seeing what others don't see, you know, so not being afraid to take risks, I think is important because you're not going to get anything given to you. Yeah.
One more. Oh, yes, please.
I was going to question.
No, please. We welcome it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I know, when you first started, geospatial jobs weren't really a thing, right? You couldn't really go out, you couldn't really find a job that said geospatial analyst in this, right? So can you speak on the companies that you worked with or the companies you supported, how they have increased and start making that a job title, right? And because I know with geospatial, a lot of people are like, it's still a thing. It's not really, you can't really have a whole profession. And I'm like, no, you can have a whole profession. Obviously in this room, we got some great people in here. Can you just talk about your history on how you've seen like the rise of geospatial jobs in your industry? Any kind of insights you want to say on that?
So geospatial, was a massively important role in my company, and so at Maxar we had as was mentioned, I had a team of about 1,200 folks. Of those, I'd say that at least 15%, so 150, 200 had strong geospatial skill set. So whether they were kind of a day in, day out geospatial analysts, or they looked at some intersection between geospatial analysis and data science, those were clearly important skill sets. And the type of roles really varied from. We had a team in Tampa that took a lot of open source intelligence and added geospatial context to it because one of their main customers was the SOCOM, U.S. Special Operations Command, where they needed to be able to understand the human geography in dozens of countries around the world to more applied applications and more of the raster world, so like leveraging imagery and terrain data to be able to do things like climate studies. So I think there's a large set of opportunities. I think finding where geospatial analysis can be augmented with some of these other technologies, I think is really important.
So from my perspective, it's always fascinating to hear Tony's perspective, but from mine, we're going to talk about multiple ints, so it's called multi-ints. And so I started out primarily as a SIG, signals intelligence. Here's the stuff that's that's in the air that we see right throughout the electromagnetic spectrum. And so when it comes to telling a picture about what's going on at a certain period of time and place and moment, geo-int, right? Visualizing that became really apparent very easily when you're just telling a story around this person went from point A to point B to point C, and the ability to make, the quote, sense making, make sense of that type of movement, giving that information to people on the ground that have to make a decision, whether it's defense, warfighter, or agricultural. That's where you start to see the real power of a geo-int, and then the recognizing the skill set of geospatial professionals that have a very bespoke skill set that's needed.
That's important. Thank you so much. Give it up for our panel.